Hello, thank you for taking out the time. This video is on the Nakshatra of Mrigasira. It's ruled by Lord Soma. I'll be sharing the mythology linked to Lord Soma in the first half of the video, and in the second half I'll be sharing how different planets behave in Mrigasira. Lord Soma is known to be the divine form of moon, and more importantly, Lord Soma is known to be behind the nectar of immortality for the gods. The gods rely on Lord Soma for immortality. They also rely on Lord Soma for mental and physical strength. So the Mrigasira native is likely to be relied upon by others. Like in a big company, there's one person who's inspiring others. People rely on that person to perform, so the entire company performs. Like we see in sports, there's one superstar and the whole team rallies around that person. This nectar of immortality is not only immortalizing the gods, it's providing them the strength. Therefore, the entire nourishing industry, the industry linked to rejuvenation of our body, of our mind, is directly linked to Mrigasira. Like in a warm, sunny weather, we drink a glass of lemon juice, we feel rejuvenated. It's a simple example, but it's a good example of what Mrigasira is all about. This nectar of immortality linked to Mrigasira has been extracted through some divine process. This now directly links Mrigasira to industries linked to extraction and purification, like a perfumes industry extracting perfumes from flowers, or the oil and gas industry. I have met someone through far, far away who had a strong Mrigasira's influence on the career-related houses, and the person had a background in the oil and gas industry. Now, this extraction process can also be applied on a mental plane. Mrigasira is a very creative nakshatra. I'll be sharing the mythology a bit later. The point I want to make now is that the person would have the ability to extract that creative talent. This nakshatra has the power to make the world more delightful. So by means of that creative ability, like a singer, later I'll be sharing, Adele, the singer from England, has a very strong Mrigasira's influence on her chart. Her chart is an excellent example of Mrigasira's creative ability. So once again, Mrigasira has the ability to make the world more delightful. Now, this extraction process can also be on a spiritual plane, where the person removes oneself from all distractions and concentrates one's thoughts at the eye center and is able to achieve enlightenment. So you have purified your mind and have been able to concentrate at the eye center. Now, immortality, spirituality, I have symbolized Mrigasira's creative ability with a diamond. All of them have one thing in common, and that's permanence. So it's likely to be the case that others rely on Lord Soma for a very long time. Like Lord Soma is known to be the pillar around which people rally. Like in families, we have our mother. She's the pillar of the family and we rally around her. And that's a great example, as Lord Soma is known to be the divine form of moon. and moon is akin to the mother. And since this nakshatra has a lot to do with nourishment, Lord Soma is known to be the king of the plants kingdom. So Mrigasira's native can be very fond of gardening or taking care of plants. At my home, a massage therapist generally visits us and for my mother, and I've always seen her whilst she's going back to her place, leaving our house, she would always water the plants. She has this natural inclination towards taking care of plants. So I haven't seen her birth chart, but I'm sharing that example because I think it's a very Mrigasira's related example. The mythology linked to Mrigasira is very interesting. Whilst I was explaining to you the mythology linked to Rohini, I had mentioned Lord Brahma, who's ruling Rohini, went after Rohini in a way that wasn't right, as Rohini was born from Lord Brahma, and Lord Brahma, driven by lust, went after Rohini. A similar example is seen in Mrigasira. Goddess Usas, she is known to be the goddess of dawn. The time of dawn is very beautiful. Lord Brahma here in this story is running after goddess Usas. She converts herself in the form of a female deer, and he converts himself into a male deer. Seeing this, Lord Rudra, we also know him more popularly as Lord Shiva, the god of destruction. In a way, he's maintaining law and order. He saw this and felt he had to intervene, and with a bow and an arrow, he let go an arrow in the direction of Lord Brahma, and his head, the head of the male deer, was severed, and it fell into the sky in the constellation which is now known as Mrigasira, which translates to head of a male deer. Now this is the main reason behind Mrigasira's creative ability. Why is that? Mrigasira is occupied by the head of the Lord of the creation. The head here is symbolizing the peak of creation, the pinnacle one can achieve in one's creative endeavors. So let's focus on the head of the Lord of the creation. This symbolizes that the person would be in pursuit of excellence. Nothing short of excellence would work. And the entire story conveys that the native may have the tendency to run after things which are unattainable. Like someone tells you that, no, this cannot be done. And you jump on it and you say, okay, I'm going to do everything possible to achieve it. I hope you are able to comprehend in which direction am I moving now, which is the direction of Mrigasira's planetary ruler. Some of the things I've mentioned are Mars linked. This desire for excellence, going after things which are unachievable. For those reasons, Mars is given the responsibility of Mrigasira. Mars is the planetary ruler of this section of the sky. See, the story is also conveying that the native might be intent on pleasing oneself. And if that's the case, the person is likely to have a darker side, a tamasic energy. That's also linked to Mars, and that is also linked to the nakshatra of Mrigasira. This section of the sky belongs to the guna of tamasic. So in pursuit of excellence, in wanting to do something creative, doing something which hasn't been done before, the person may forget that means are as important as the end. Let's see how Mrigasira is classified. It would be no surprise to you that this nakshatra belongs to the caste of a creative person. So all artists are seen from Mrigasira. The tamasic energy was the only negative side to Mrigasira. It has the nature of mridhu, which translates to soft. Now, why would that be? You tell me. I started off explaining to you that Lord Soma is behind the nectar of immortality and how others rely on Lord Soma for nourishment. That is the softer maternal side of this nakshatra. But you must not confuse this nakshatra as linked to the healthcare industry. If it is linked to healthcare, it's more likely to be linked to energy drinks or protein shakes. I generally have a protein shake after a workout. Products which are meant for rejuvenating our body, like vitamin supplements we take. Mrigasira is linked to that aspect of the healthcare industry. It's not directly linked to healthcare, but it's linked to that aspect. And lastly, this nakshatra has the temperament of a divine force. See, the native would be helpful. It's like an art director of a design firm. The art director is relied upon by others for creative inspiration, but the art director is also going to be helpful to others. He or she would help others achieve the same pinnacle that person has achieved. So 3 positives. The only negative to this nakshatra is that it has a darker side. And I'd like to get right into it. Alan Turing, the great British mathematician, I'm sure you've seen the movie The Imitation Game. The tamasic energy I want to link to his life. Unfortunately, he took away his life at the end. So this darker side linked to Mrigasira has to be controlled. Now, if we study his chart, I find Venus ruling the 6th house in his case, and the 6th house is work related, and Venus is in Mrigasira. So work is likely to be centered around achieving perfection. He can be a creative person, an inventor. Why was his work linked to code breaking? This is where you must also study Mars's position, which is the planetary ruler of Mrigasira, and Mars in his chart is in Ashlesha. Later in the video I'll be posting on Ashlesha, and whilst I'll be explaining to you Mars in Ashlesha, you'll know Mars Ashlesha essentially is a combination belonging to a spy. The person is likely to prevent bad things from happening. So he's using his creative ability to prevent something bad from happening. And he's going to stop at nothing short of excellence. So the person goes to the extreme, and therefore this nakshatra has a tamasic energy. I'd like to share the example of Adele as well right away. And in her case, the chart is very educational. If you read her chart, you'll understand how to read a birth chart. That's my view. If you study her career house, it's ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter in the 11th house, likely to do things on a large scale. Jupiter is in Bharani. A person can be in a creative career. That would be determined by Venus, which is Bharani's planetary ruler, and Venus in her chart is in the 1st in Mrigasira. Venus, incidentally, is also present in the 10th house, in the Navamsha and the Dasamsha. So her career is directly linked to Venus Mrigasira's position. Now, unlike Alan Turing, where we found Mars to be in Ashlesha, in Adele I find Mars to be in Dhanishta. Later in the videos, when I'll be explaining to you the meaning of Dhanishta, you'll understand why Dhanishta is directly linked to the music industry. Dhanishta is directly linked to the sense of rhythm. Mars actually is exalted in Dhanishta. So therefore, in her case, we saw her career taking a more creative turn. It's also ruling the houses related to creativity, the 5th house and the 12th house, which has to do with our imaginative power. Complications in her personal life has been due to Saturn's position in the 7th house. Her chart is a great example of how to read a birth chart, and I hope I've conveyed that to you. Right, so if you have your rising as Mrigasira, you are going to be someone very driven, very passionate, wanting to be the best at what you do, very competitive, and you'll stop at nothing short of excellence, which can also be a negative side to your way of doing things, as this nakshatra has a tamasic energy, so you'll need proper guidance in life. You could be the one people seek inspiration from in life, and most importantly, you have the capability to rise above the physical world and move towards spirituality and taste the nectar of immortality, which is centered around the eye center. Now, this wouldn't be complete if you don't study the position of Mars, which I have tried to explain through the examples, how important that was. Furthermore, you must also look at the sign. Mrigasira is falling under Taurus and Gemini. So under Taurus, it's likely that you have a stronger creative side. You are very attractive. And if it's the sign of Gemini that your rising Mrigasira is falling in, then you'd be seen as someone who is very social, very talkative. So it depends on the sign which Mrigasira falls in, and furthermore, the sign Mrigasira falls in the Navamsha chart is also going to be very important. These are known as the padhas. The first padha would be the sign of Leo. The first padha rather would fall in the sign of Leo, and therefore the person is likely to be very creative. It can also be a public figure. If the sign is Virgo, the person is likely to be the one who's very detail oriented and can also be very service oriented, in addition to having Mrigasira's innate qualities. If the sign is Libra, a person is likely to have a very strong design capability, and the person is going to be very attractive. If the sign is Scorpio, then the extraction and purification side of Mrigasira would be seen in the person's way of doing things. If I take you back to the example of Alan Turing, Venus in his chart is placed in the 8th sign, the sign of Scorpio, in the Navamsha. So we are seeing the extraction process behind his code breaking. And in the case of Adele, it's actually the sign of Libra where Venus falls in the Navamsha. So this is an important exercise you must do. You must not stop at the nakshatra. You must study the nakshatra's planetary ruler, and you must also see how that nakshatra is in the Navamsha. By that I mean you must identify and study the sign the nakshatra is falling in the Navamsha chart. So now I'm going to be sharing how different planets behave in Mrigasira, starting with Moon. So let's do that. When Moon is in Mrigasira, the person has a very artistic mind. The person would have a strong nourishing side. The person starts playing the role of a mother, like asking your friends, did you drink enough water? Did you take that medicine? The person is relied upon by others for strength. Like you say, whenever I have a problem, I call that particular friend. Moon Mrigasira. The person is also going to have a very social side if Mrigasira falls in the sign of Gemini, that the person is a non-stop speaker. The person has many stories to tell, and very interesting stories to tell. The creative ability would also lie in the native's ability to extract the most useful creative idea. Like in a design firm, you go through many different ideas and then you filter down the best suited for that project. The person would have the capability to do so. The person can be self-centered and intent on pleasing oneself. That naturally depends on how Mars is placed and how Moon is placed in the Navamsha, but that would be seen in the person's way of life. And the person, they have a natural interest in the world of plants. Like we hear stories that that person has so many plants, or that person is very fond of gardening. That is my view of Moon in Mrigasira. When Sun is in Mrigasira, I see a person who has the ability to inspire others with one's innovative, imaginative, creative thinking. Like an art director inspiring other art directors, so you become like a source of inspiration. If, however, Mrigasira falls in Taurus, the person may also be very proud in a not so nice way of one's creative ability. If it's in the sign of Gemini, the person's style of speaking can be authoritative, that this is my idea, follow my lead. The person can be a CEO of a design firm. So others rely on the CEO. They rely on the CEO's creative ideas. The person may end up playing a father figure in the lives of others in the creative industry. The desire for excellence would also be linked to making a name for oneself. Like we hear stories that so-and-so artist was very fond of winning that award for the best design this year. So the person is also going to be driven by the recognition, the gain in authority, accompanied with the creative side to this nakshatra. The greatest quality of the person would be the person's consistency and the person's reliability. People would feel, okay, I can rely on this person. Sun is a lot about consistency, and so is this nakshatra. The person can be very self-centered, and that may affect the person's relations with other people, whether it's in their personal life or in their professional life, depending on where Sun is placed. And the person would be very reluctant, in my view, to take any support from anyone else. The person might feel, I am independent and I can achieve this big task all by myself. And lastly, Sun is known to eradicate diseases, and this nakshatra has a lot to do with the plants kingdom, so the person can come up with a medicinal plant which might help you become more mentally and physically active, so the person can also have an association with the healthcare industry, particularly in helping others gaining strength in some ways. That's my view of Sun in Mrigasira. When Venus is in Mrigasira, Venus is all about creativity, and so is this nakshatra, so there's a lot common between Venus and Mrigasira. In terms of love, which Venus symbolizes, the person can be very picky. that I have gone on many dates, but I just cannot find the right person. That's a very Venus Mrigasira like way of thinking. And if the sign is Gemini, then the person can be in more than one relationship or many relationships in one's life. Not necessarily throughout life. I'm just referring to the time when we are in the phase of exploration. So here the exploration can be a bit never ending. The person can make an excellent financial advisor. Mrigasira is a lot about this ability to extract useful material from raw materials. So as a financial advisor, what do? You look at the circumstances and you give your advice. So you extract the most useful data from raw data and you give your advice based on that. The person is likely to be pleasure seeking, and therefore this desire to please oneself is a desire the person would need to control. And this pursuit of excellence in creative projects can also lead the person to following paths which aren't very advisable or aren't very helpful. The person can go to the extreme. I had earlier taken the example of Alan Turing. The maternal side of Mrigasira can lead to the person helping others build relations, strengthen their relations. The person can make an excellent relationship counselor, particularly if the sign is Gemini. And the person would be relied upon for one's advice, one's guidance. Venus belongs to the caste of a Brahmin, so the person can be actually like a counselor of some kind, whether it's in the creative industry or the love industry. And since Mrigasira is linked to the plant kingdom and Venus signifies the beauty industry, the person can also find oneself linked to the cosmetics industry. Perfumes come to mind, particularly if Venus in your chart is linked to one of your career-related houses. That is my view of Venus in Mrigasira. When Mercury is there in Mrigasira, the person would have a very creative style of expressing oneself. So creative writers, digital marketeers, advertisers, spokespersons, public speakers, the ones on television, hosting a show, they are, in my view, linked to Mercury in Mrigasira. See, the ability to extract the most useful information is something the native would be known for. Mercury is very analytical. It's a very intelligent planet. So the native would have the ability to go through volumes of data, of information, and extract the most useful information from that. Like newspaper articles we read. Maybe they talk about a big topic like how do we see the inflation in the next 1 year? So there are a number of variables that need to be considered, but this person would have the capability to understand that. Similarly, the person can make an excellent financial advisor, just like Venus in Mrigasira, Mercury in Mrigasira, particularly in Mercury's case now, if the sign is Taurus, unlike in the case of Venus Mrigasira, where the sign was more favoring a career and financial advisory if it was in Gemini. Now, reliability of a Mercury Mrigasira-like person would be the reliability we experience from our friends. That you know what, this guy I can call at any time in the night, and this person would be there to receive my call. But Mercury is also known for fickleness. So here there are two opposites. The reliability of Mrigasira, but the person can also change one's position. So you may find some inconsistency in Mercury Mrigasira's way of dealing with others. In one's social life, you'll feel, last month you were saying this, now you are changing your position. So the native is likely to be more flexible to changing circumstances. Like politicians, they say, we are going to do that, but then they realize, no, that may not happen. So they change their ground. I'm not saying this in a negative way, but I'm trying to explain the flexibility that the native would have. So the ones who are on television, they are conducting a live program, right? So they form their opinions on the spot. So a Mercury Mrigasira-like person can have that quality. I think that person can make an excellent talk host if Mercury is in Mrigasira, particularly in the sign of Gemini. Mercury signifies businesses, and so the person's business can be design linked, can be linked to television, can be linked to public speaking, or the person's business can also be linked to the plant kingdom. Mrigasira has a direct link to the plant kingdom, so the person may start a business in that sector. Lastly, Mrigasira's tamasic energy under Mercury can translate to the person becoming too fickle in one's way of doing things. The person keeps changing one's position for one's own good. And here the politician is a prime example. Today they say something and tomorrow they shift their ground. The person can become self-serving and may not carefully consider the consequences, which is directly linked to Mercury. And when it's in Mrigasira, the person feels, this might be better for me, so let's shift our ground. So it would depend on how Mars is placed and how Mercury Mrigasira is in the Navamsha, but that's my initial views on this position. Mars in Mrigasira translates to an artist who is very passionate and driven, and immediately the person can go to the extreme. Oh, this is a project I want to do, and I want to make sure this is the best. I want to achieve excellence. Mars is known for tamasic energy, and so is this nakshatra. The person could go to the extreme. And here, if the sign is Gemini, the person can become excessively competitive with the use of words. The person may start saying things about competition. That, you know what, my creations are much better. Look at the number of hits this person's creation has come up with. Here the person would find more peace if creations require a level of competition. Like sports. Sports is a great example. Every now and then we look at a sports person, we say this person has a very artistic way of playing. Like a footballer on the field, we see, okay, this person had this artistry. That is a very Mars Mrigasira-like quality. Artistic, at the same time very competitive. The person can be an innovator. Mars is known for unparalleled technical skills, and therefore when technical skills and creativity come together, the person can excel in engineering. The person can also have a background in finance, fintech industry. Mars Mrigasira in Taurus, that can be the case. The person's creations are going to be flawless. So Mars Mrigasira is an artist who will go to the extreme, but the creations would be unparalleled. The creations would be so accurate and so precise that the precision and accuracy itself would be very worthy of praise. Others might rely on Mars Mrigasira-like person for one's technical prowess, and the native is likely to help others by being physically present and helping them in tangible ways. So others might feel we can rely on a Mars Mrigasira-like person, as this person would be physically here and would practically explain how things have to be done. That is Mars Mrigasira's maternal side. The person can have a background in the oil and gas industry or any other industry linked to purification of any kind, particularly if Mars in Mrigasira is linked to one of your career-related houses. And the person can also make an excellent motivator. The person can inspire people around oneself to be mentally and, more importantly, physically active. Mars Mrigasira, however, can fall prey to being very self-centered, going to the extreme, and that is the aspect of this combination that the native has to be careful about. When Jupiter is in Mrigasira, the native is an art director. The person is going to be very knowledgeable in the field of art. Like we meet individuals and they say, you know what, I have visited so many art galleries, so many museums, and this is what I know, this is my understanding. The art from the 1940s was like this, the oil they were using at that time was like that. That is Jupiter Mrigasira, particularly if the sign is Taurus. The desire for excellence and the desire for the unattainable is likely to be better controlled when Jupiter is in Mrigasira. The person would have a philosophical understanding of things. The person would search for a purpose behind one's creations. Like we come across creative projects and we get a sense of how thoughtful that project is. The project is telling a story. The project is actually educational. The person can even be a teacher of art with this combination. This desire for excellence can lead to exploration. The native might feel, I need to travel elsewhere for inspiration. Like, let's go to South Korea, and I've heard the fine art there is really interesting. So the person's travel and related interests are linked to inspiration. The person is in search for some creative inspiration. Jupiter, very importantly, is directly linked to spirituality and getting the right guidance in this domain, and Mrigasira is strongly linked to spirituality. So the person can become a seeker of one's divine self. The person can then enlighten oneself with proper guidance. And that is an aspect that the person must strive to go after. The person's style of nourishing and protecting others would be through knowledge. That the native has helped people around oneself who are relying on the native by educating them. That, you know what, this is how you can do it. I'm giving you the knowledge, the necessary purpose. Now it's up to you to act. So the person's way of helping others is by motivating them, by educating them. So motivational speakers can be seen with Jupiter and Mrigasira, particularly if the sign is Gemini. Jupiter-like person is known to be of help to others, and the divine aspect of this nakshatra, the helpful aspect of this nakshatra would be best expressed when Jupiter finds itself in this section of the sky. That's my view. When Saturn is in Mrigasira, the extraction process that I had linked to the extraction of the nectar of immortality would now be the focus. That extraction process is a very careful process, and Saturn is all about being careful for a very long time. Like we hear stories that a car which is manufactured in that workshop, it takes so many man hours. It's carefully assembled, it's hand assembled. So Saturn Mrigasira like person would have that capability to create something over a long time using one's technical skills, but also doing it manually. Handmade products that we see are directly linked, in my view, to Mrigasira, particularly if the sign is Taurus. The person would be very dependable, particularly if the sign is Taurus, like the eldest in the family, a grandfather. We rely on the grandfather. Every time there's an issue, we go up to the grandfather. A Saturn Mrigasira like person could have that place in one's friend circle or one's family. Ancient sciences are linked to Saturn, and the plant kingdom is linked to Mrigasira, so there might be something common there. The person can become a student of Ayurveda, for example, use of medicinal plants for healing others. The person may also use art as a form of public service, like bringing people together for a workshop to promote a sense of community, and to also use art as a form of therapy. That's how I see Saturn Mrigasira. Saturn has a darker side, and this nakshatra has a tamasic side, so therefore the person can find oneself locking oneself in a room, thinking that my creations were not appreciated, or it has taken me so long, am I ever going to finish what I started? The person can get into this downward spiral, thinking negatively, and that is an aspect of one's way of thinking the person needs to overcome. Saturn Mrigasira, if the sign is Gemini, the person can be an excellent communicator, an editor, for example. With Saturn in Mrigasira in the sign of Taurus, your career can also be in risk management. But if the energy is channelized very well, a Saturn Mrigasira-like person is someone who's never going to give up. As pursuit of excellence, Mrigasira is met with Saturn's consistency. The person would have the ability to eventually be seen as a master technician. That is my view of Saturn in Mrigasira. When Rahu is in Mrigasira, the person is likely to delude oneself into thinking that by accomplishing a creative project, the person is likely to achieve happiness. So the person would find oneself constantly chasing the wrong goal in life. Particularly if the sign is Gemini, the person's mind would be racing. I can do this, I can do that, I have this business idea, I have this creative idea. And that is something the person needs to be more thoughtful about. Rahu is known for addictions, and Mrigasira has a tamasic side. So if you find yourself having Rahu in Mrigasira and about to enter Rahu's Antardasha, for example, then you need to be careful. You need to be careful and also hopeful that Rahu's chapter, Dasha, is not going to stay forever. So if you do find yourself in that phase of life where you feel by doing something I'll escape my problems, you must know that these problems are also limited by time. The creative ability would be unique. Your creations are likely to be never done before. Rahu belongs to the caste of an outcast. Rahu Mrigasira could inspire others due to the unique creative ability, but the others might feel that they cannot rely on a Rahu Mrigasira-like person, particularly if the sign is Gemini. So they would feel that this person had told us that I'll be available for help, but the person isn't. So the person gives you an illusion that I can be relied upon, but the person wouldn't be in practice. It might be the person is too self-centered, is too involved in one's creations that the person forgets one's commitments. That's one way of looking at this. Rahu has this unreliability linked to it in Mrigasira that is likely to be unfocused. Rahu is a lot about exploration, and so foreign objects being discovered underneath the ground can also be an area of interest for the native. I'll even attach the oil and gas industry. As we discover there's a new site and that has to be drilled into, and Rahu can be linked to such projects in foreign sites. And lastly, the person is likely to constantly seek a change. And the purpose behind this desire for change would be to search for an inspiration. So a Rahu Mrigasira like person can be very fond of travel. Then I went to this foreign place and I discovered that. So this desire for discovering things, that is inherently linked to the desire to build something unique. And for that you need inspiration. So the person may have this constant desire to challenge oneself by putting oneself in foreign places or foreign circumstances. It's a difficult position, as the person can go to the extreme, and that is something the person needs to control. When Ketu is in Mrigasira, the person can find oneself running into circumstances where the person is searching for answers from within. So that nectar of immortality present at the eye center can be explored by a Ketu Mrigasira like person. The person is likely to have natural creative ability. The person can be a student of ancient sciences linked to rejuvenation of the body by the use of plants in particular. The person can also have a career in extraction and purification, particularly if Ketu is in the 10th house. The person can also make an excellent financial analyst. Ketu is excellent at analyzing numbers, and particularly if it falls in the sign of Taurus in this section of the sky, the person would possess piercing logic. The person's reliability would not be dependable. Others might feel they can rely on a Ketu Mrigasira like person, but the person, when in need, may be absent. Ketu Mrigasira like person would have this strong desire to find answers in solitude. So the person can also constantly search for that by means of travel or moving away from the society. And that is where this tamasic energy would come into play. Here the person might feel, oh, I haven't been appreciated for my creativity, I'll lock myself, I'll go into that mountain. Or even fall prey to addictions. The person would go to the extreme in pursuit of excellence, and these are aspects that the native would have to be very careful about. Well, this is my view on Mrigasira. If you have any questions, please post a comment. And if you'd like to stay in touch, please subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.